Welcome to session 2 of our Excite Strategy Summit. And today we are going to be talking about tuning into change. Why is change important to us? Why are we talking about change in the first place?
Well, there's a double meaning in the title, tune in to change. So on one hand, it's about tuning in to help other people with where they're at. We find a lot of people, when thinking about new ideas, tend to focus on the solution a lot and sometimes lose sight of what the outcome is they're creating for people. And often that means that they're trying to help people shift from A to B, whatever that is for their customers. But the other meaning about this is tuning into the change that you want to make for yourself. And so understanding your needs, like we talked about yesterday, your purpose, your vision, what's driving you, and how to bridge that gap between that and what the outside world needs. And so there's this sort of merry dance that we try to strive where you're understanding what's driving you, but also understanding what's driving your potential customers. And that, I guess, journey you go on together to explore what is the value that you can create for them, and ultimately how can you help them solve their problems and not get too obsessed by any solutions. And that's something that we've learned over the years, is you can get too tied to a solution and end up spending a lot of time and money and energy on the wrong thing, which is actually heartbreaking when that's your baby, your new project, your new business. And we've worked with so many people over the years, particularly when we were running the agency, who'd spend an awful lot of money with us to build a product, and then potentially 6 months, a year later, when it lands in the hand of customers, they find out actually this is not what I thought it was going to be. It doesn't get the response they thought for whatever reason. And so understanding more about the people you're creating this for and their worlds, I found to be a really powerful way to get going, because it means that there's less assumptions being made, and you're reducing the risk ultimately for both of you.
There's something around when we talk about the idea of a change happening in someone's life, it brings it down to a more connected human approach. And I think in this day and age of business, particularly online or business driven by technology, we think about all of these buzzwords around AI and blockchain and decentralization. Well, maybe not that in terms of humans, but there's a lot of jargon and tech speak, particularly in the startup world, that gets us focused too much on the thing we're trying to create rather than the people we want to help. And so I was wondering also, maybe if you want to talk to this aspect of when we start connecting with the people, how does it help us also, or how do we need to behave in order to get help in designing and building? Because a lot of the time we might be fixated on, I have the idea and it has to work this way. If we're going to think about change and helping other people, what does that mean in terms of how tightly we hold on to solutions and how we accept feedback, for instance? Lawrence, I don't know your perspective.
Well, it can be difficult because it's having sometimes challenging conversations with people. And there's a great line that Rob Fitzpatrick uses, who was on the Fireside last year about, he was talking about books, but his other book is about customer interviews. And he said, bad news gets worse the longer you leave it. So sometimes finding out information that's going to take you off course is best to find out early, when it's cost you less, rather than later when you've spent a lot of time on the wrong thing. So in some ways it takes a bit of a mindset shift to understand that there's lots of things you don't know that you'll only ever find out. And sometimes it can be as simple as going for a coffee with someone or having a Zoom call, and just asking them about their world, not assuming too much. But that can be tricky, because often I think entrepreneurs can be a stubborn bunch, me included, where you think my idea is right, I'm going to be different. I hear all this stuff about why you need to test your ideas and maybe prototype and experiment, but ultimately I know what's needed. And sometimes that might be true, but often you can be really wrong, and it can be quite disconcerting when you find out you're wrong. And so it's not about trying to be proven right. Ultimately, it's trying to find out, where have I got gaps in my knowledge? Where have I got things I don't understand, or I'm assuming too much? And maybe it's even as simple as language too. Maybe the product's right, but the way you talk about it is wrong. And I've found having conversations with people will help you to understand how they talk about it and what language they use. And sometimes that can inform how you then talk about it to them.
I think it's important, that aspect about language, because I feel it's also about using the right language at the right time. So presenting your solution, your product, your service at the right time for the person in the right way so that they can relate it to their own journey. And this is why thinking about the context of whatever you do within a broader arc of the journey of the people you want to help. And this is why we're going to talk about the journey of change, because there are different stages where people will be more receptive to the things that you're trying to create. And if you are really people focused and you're a creative type who likes to make lots of different things, there's a chance that you can make lots of different things for different stages of that journey. And so we're going to talk a bit more later about what it means, these stages of the journey, what does that journey entail, and where people are at. But I think we want to communicate is why it's important to think about in terms of a journey of change. And for me, one of the things that's helpful, it helps you broaden out the different ways that you can create impact and the way you can help. Because sometimes the impact that you want to create can take a lot of effort. You might be running up against resource issues, money worries, people's mindsets, capabilities, contexts. And while you might have an idea that you love to put out into the world and you'd love to give to people, it might take a lot of energy for you to end up making the impact you want to make. And one of the things that underpin a lot of what we talk about, not only within our community, but also within the Vision 2020 program, is how can we create more ease in the work that we do? How can we go from feeling like hard work is the way to make change in the world and see, actually, maybe there are ways that are effortless to us that actually make big shifts for other people. It's just knowing when to step in and when to do that stuff. Mm. Do you have anything to add on to that, Lawrence, or your own experience of that?
Well, we'll talk about the journey of change in a minute, but I think the one thing I've learned from that and how it's helped me and us in terms of framing things we create is understanding where people are at on the journey and understanding that can influence how you design things. So rather than trying to offer something to someone at the wrong point in their journey, when they're maybe too busy or they're not thinking about that thing right now, then it's just not helpful. And so sometimes you can have the right product at the wrong time, and it can be the same people just at a different point in their journey. And that's one thing that's really helped me. So for example, when in the past we targeted maybe people who are starting a new business for the first time, often people who are starting out for the first time, they're in chaos because they have so many things to do, so many people giving them advice. Someone's saying you should join an accelerator. Someone's saying you should go on some business program with a bank. Someone's saying you should read this book. Who do you listen to? There's so many things out there, so much advice, not sure who to listen to. And so we found that actually at that point, offering people a deep dive into something is not helpful because they don't have the time and maybe they're not as interested. But people on their second mountain journey, people who tend to come on the Vision 2020, tend to be people who are either running their second business or maybe they've had a career behind them. This might be their first business, but they've got all that knowledge, all that expertise that they can bring with them. And they understand that they can't do it on their own. They understand who they want to listen to. They understand that actually there's a bigger world out there for me, and I've tried doing it this way, and it's maybe got me this far, but won't get me to the next point. And so that means we can take a deeper dive with those people because they understand what's on offer. And that means, hence, working with people over 5 months is less of a big thing because they know that they trust us and what we bring to the table. So that then informs how we design the program rather than trying to offer that to people who don't get it and maybe don't have that time commitment towards it.
I think this lends itself to kind of the business benefits around thinking about the journey of change. So on one hand, it's been influenced, or we've been influenced by as I understand it, a psychological model created by Virginia Satir, and it's called the Satir Change Model. But in terms of the benefit to business, what I see it as, in terms of how it's helped me, and even how I communicate about some of the other stuff that we do, it helps you focus, because you're not trying to help lots of different people with lots of different things. It's like you're starting to hone in on a particular person's journey and a particular person's need. With the timing thing that Lawrence was talking about, you start being able to articulate, or start to think about articulating, what we call the value proposition. Why is this valuable? Not just because it's always valuable, because it's also valuable at a particular time, because it then links to a need and a shift and something, that a problem, like we say, that someone wants to solve, or maybe a feeling they want to get. And that's something really interesting and important. I think when we talk about value, a lot of times, in our experience as well with building products for clients, they think more is valuable, more complicated is valuable, more clever is valuable, when in fact none of that really counts if the customer doesn't understand it, and if it doesn't relate to a positive shift that they're looking for in their lives, or whether that's a new skill they want to gain, or a change of perspective that just makes their life more easy, or a process that they've acquired that then means that their business works more effortlessly, or they're able to make more money, get more clients. Ultimately, if you can't speak to those positive things that people are looking for in their lives, those changes, then talking about the value of what you do is going to be a challenge, and also you're probably going to be talking at cross purposes. So there's kind of two things that we always talked about in the past in our startup world. We talk about persona creation, understanding who it is you want to work for and what it is they're trying to achieve. And we talked about value proposition. How do you get people to realize that paying you money for this thing is a worthwhile thing to do? And I feel that thinking about this journey of change and using the Satir Change Model adds another lens, particularly for the people that we want to work with, who are more focused on positive impact, making the world a better place, making people feel better about themselves. That feels like a lot more palatable way of thinking about things, and a way to introduce those ideas, than purely about money and about trying to manipulate people into deciding that you're a good person to work with. And so there's this idea of thinking about change, or thinking about it in this way. I thought we'd just briefly touch, before we talk about the actual journey of change, what is the cost of not following this approach, of not thinking about people and change, and just ploughing on with your own assumptions? What have you seen as the problems about that, Lawrence?
Well, it can be an expensive mistake. If I think to projects where you just follow your gut fully and just go with what's in your head, I think that's fine. But it's to understanding, like, what's that? What could that cost you? So, are you willing to risk everything on one bet ultimately? And it is a bet. If you have that idea of, I'm going to build this thing, it's a platform, it's whatever it might be. This is how it's going to look. This is how it's going to feel. This is how I want it to work. How I want it to work. These are the features I think it needs. If it's an online product, but again, if it could be an event, whatever. This is the ingredients it needs. Without having any sort of input on that from the people you want to create it for, you're taking a massive risk. So it is a gamble. It becomes a much bigger gamble. In the startup world, you would tend to encourage people to take smaller bets, and so put lots of ideas out there and see which one sticks. And that also almost becomes too scientific, where it's not about what you want to create, it's just about what the world needs. And so, again, like I said earlier, it's this merry dance between understanding, what is it I want to create, what's my vision, being committed to the vision, but not being committed to the solution. And I think that's a big shift for people, is you can be stubborn about that vision, but I think you need to be quite open and loose in terms of how you get there. And almost everyone we've worked with, us included, have probably had an original vision of what they thought their business would look like in terms of what they did, but it's evolved over time based on contact with the market. And so if you're not open to that, we've seen people who are committed to one solution, they're ideas die and then the business closes because they give up because they think that didn't work. The vision I had was that product. It wasn't anything else. They didn't open themselves up to more possibility. But if you separate the vision from the product, then I think you have the opportunity to then stick to that vision and say, like with us, we might have thought we would just do workshops. When we started out, that's what we started doing. Workshops with people. Over time, that led us to doing summer camp and then retreats and then online communities and programs, things we never thought we'd have done. So because we were open to what worked and what didn't and what we had appetite for, that allowed us to deliver on that vision in many different ways and actually have more of a diverse set of interests and projects and revenue streams, which again has helped us get through the last couple of years. So I think it gives the business more resilience if you're more open to adapting to the market, because ultimately every business is going through change at the moment. And if you don't open yourselves up to different ways of doing things, then you're taking a big risk that, there's a single point of failure ultimately.
And it's interesting there what you say. For me, it conjures up the idea of being agile, being a bit more fluid, not being fixed in your ideas, the difference between a growth mindset and maybe a fixed mindset. And also with that in mind, is the idea of that us as founders, entrepreneurs, professionals, how we change as we do the work and being open to that change. And one of the biggest shifts, at least for me, and I see it in other people, is going from this idea of business being build it once, put a process together, scale it, and then that's you for the rest of your life. I'm just going to basically milk this cow as much as possible, and it's going to be very fixed, and looking for that real silver bullet that you just build once and that's it. And it works for some people, but then I think there's others out there who want more variety, maybe a bit more adventure, a bit more creativity in the way they work, but don't know how to apply that in the context of business, and don't also appreciate how they will change as they do the work, and the work changes and the people they meet change, and how that is, like you said before, this kind of merry dance, not only between the kind of the visionary and the data, but also between yourself and your identity of who you think you need to be as a successful person to actually what you can be, and all the different possibilities because of the new ways that you've been able to work and the new ways that you've been able to create value. And so, a very important part of what we do is not just about the business, it's also sort of centering and focusing on the founder and the person who's actually trying to create the value, and how they're looking at the world and the way they work in a very different way, and how that change and shift occurs. So having those go hand in hand, I think, is very much the way we want to look at all the stuff that we do, whether it's a retreat or summer camp or an online program. Like you said, Lawrence, there's a vision, and the vision is how do those changes happen in our world so that we can then change other parts of the world, and the different ways we do that, because there's so many different ways depending on where people are at.
And your point about the product founder fit, I think, is an important one, because I was chatting to a guy yesterday who's joining the next cohort, and he was saying, he's drawn to building a community for his project, for his business, but he's worried about what that would mean for his own energy levels and well-being, ultimately, because it's a big commitment. He sees what we do and how we do it, and that sometimes scares people off because they think of building community as a way of life. That means it's 24/7 and everyone's going to demand your time. And so on one hand, he has a need to belong and a need to connect, but on the other hand, he's like, actually, at what cost of that community being built? And so what we explored was this idea that actually you can still build community, but it doesn't have to dominate your life that way. There's things you can outsource, or maybe you can just have community at different intervals of the year. You don't have to have it year round. So I think it is that dance. It's not saying I have to do it this way because I've seen people do it that way and that's the only way of doing it. That's the blueprint. Ultimately, this is what I want, and this is how I can be of best service to my audience. And let's work together. Maybe there's a creative way to create value, like you said, that doesn't require a huge amount of effort.
Yeah. And that's the mindset I feel is most valuable, is that you are open to try lots of different things to get the way of working that works best for you as well as other people. So to just illustrate a bit more about how we take people on this journey of understanding the journey of change. We thought we'd just talk about the model as we use it. And there are various stages of this journey of change. And we'll probably refer essentially to the people that we want to help, the people we want to serve, to kind of, I think, give you a bit more clarity as to what it all means. But ultimately, as the overview is, like Lauren said, going from A to B. And the difference between A and B, one way I'd like to think about it is our level of performance. Not necessarily how successful you are, but how effective you can be in your work. Because it's either you've learned a skill or it's more aligned, there's more clarity, whatever it may be. But there's one way of working, which potentially is, in our case, maybe working in an agency where we were constrained by clients' needs and demands, to a place where we were more free to be more creative and to create value in different ways and to define our own briefs for projects. But making that transition has taken us 10 years, more or less, to get to here. How can we break it down and make it, I think, not necessarily make it faster, because it isn't something about speed, but just make it more clear for others to take this journey. The first point, they call it the current status quo, what's happening right now. At some point, there is an inciting incident, yeah? And it could be dramatic. And in the case of some of our clients, it's been maybe a bereavement in the family, it's maybe a redundancy, maybe it's been a burnout. I know for you, Lawrence, there was something about just losing passion for just designing for other people. Was that fair as the kind of the one of the inciting incidents?
Probably. I think it's like anything when you've been doing it for a long time. I was freelance for 5 years as a designer before we set up the agency. So I'd probably been, at the point we decided to close the agency, been doing that kind of work for 15 years. And I think I just got to a point where it wasn't that the work wasn't enjoyable. It was just maybe the projects I was working on didn't really fill me up. In the past, I would just get excited about any project. It was creative, it was fun, it was different. Some of the projects we worked on towards the end of the agency were longer jobs, and I got bored quite quickly. So I think I enjoyed the start, but then I lost a bit of interest as they turned into more delivery. And so I think for me, there was something about how they would deliver, but also I just think about the meaning behind them. For me, I had so many ideas of my own and that I wanted to action on. And so it was more the opportunity cost of working on other people's projects was limiting my own vision for my work. And so that was the thing that nagged away at me. It wasn't that necessarily I don't like these people or this work anymore. It's more, I'd rather be working on this, and this feels more exciting. And actually, that's my future on this stuff, not that, it felt like wearing an old pair of shoes. It felt like I had an old pair of shoes that didn't fit anymore, and I couldn't quite work out why.
Yeah. I think there is, like you said, that nagging, not so much nagging down, but there's it's slightly uncomfortable. There's something missing here. And I think I feel there's a lot of people who join our community or who do some of our programs. There's an understanding there's something not quite right and a change needs to happen. And then, like I said, there might be a particularly stark incident that makes them shift and say, all right, I need to make a change. I need to do something. And then they go into this, what we call this pit of chaos, where they're just basically trying to find a new direction. Are you able to maybe articulate a bit more what it feels like to be in that chaos, particularly for people that we work with who are struggling with finding a vision for the future, maybe?
Well, I think the hard thing is it's easy to keep things the same, isn't it? It's hard to change, particularly when it affects other people, particularly when money's involved, and money worries are involved as well. So that is scary for people, I think, to be in a position where I've got this safe, in inverted commas, secure role or business that's working maybe, like we did. And then there's this other thing which feels exciting and maybe a little bit scary, but more fun, but also comes with a bit of risk as well. And not just that, maybe there's an identity shift that needs to happen. Maybe there's some growth that needs to happen to step into that. But there's also, I think the key thing is having a story to tell other people about what that change is. And so we meet a lot of people who are in that chaos who really struggle to articulate how they feel and why they feel that way, because they're maybe struggling with it on their own. And so maybe they don't have the full support of their loved ones if they have partners. And, you know, I think have been very lucky with that we've had supportive families that have seen us through this, but not everyone does. And so I think it's important to have people around you who get what you're trying to do. Even on the outside, it sounds and looks a bit mad. What people don't often understand is how it feels to be in that situation. And so if you know how someone feels and they feel, whether it's deeply unhappy or just that there's something nagging away that's missing, then it makes perfect sense to want to change. Versus, oh, you've got a great job and a great salary and you got promoted or your business is flying. That's fine. Why would you want to change something? Well, it's how it feels on the inside that's most important. And so having a space to have those conversations, I think, is key, whether it's at home or with peers or with other people who walked that path before. So I think the key thing is just understanding that it's not unusual. You're not alone in that feeling of chaos. It's perfectly normal. And for me, it's just a period of transition ultimately to something hopefully more fulfilling. So it is that sort of metamorphosis from where they were before to where they want to be in the future.
I remember from my agency days, and I still encounter people like this, where they have a very specific view of what startup or business is about. And it's so focused on money and process and kind of lots of the tactics and strategies of business. And so I see, or the way I see it is people get then bogged down into learning all of those skills. You know, how do I think about copyright and patents and product design and, you know, marketing sort of hacks, all of these things in order to like have the skills to launch my business, and then totally forget why they're doing it in the first place. And so we talk about when people are in this chaos of trying to learn so much, trying to acquire all this knowledge, trying to get the confidence to be the entrepreneur, the founder that they see in the limelight, to have this just simple message. And this is one of the things that we try and communicate in the course. When someone's in chaos, they just want a simple message, something easy for them to just change their perspective. To have this simple message of actually, what about making happiness your business model? Is that possible? Is that a thing that you can actually get with? And is that something that actually is something you want? Because then if you're going to have that shift and say, oh, it isn't just about the money, there's something else here. And how can I think about it from that way? Then, and we did it, we had our Building a Startup That Matters ebook. We have the blog posts you write a lot about, and we have the podcasts. But these messages, simple messages we're trying to communicate to just inspire people to think differently. And then once we've got people on that mindset, like, okay, there is a different way that isn't so scary and chaotic and isn't just about learning lots of stuff. There's about learning about myself and what I need. How do I do it? And that's then when they're ready to do that and they accept that, then we talk about this kind of this model of this journey of change, the story of change, essentially, the practice part of it, actually doing the work and being guided to do that. And maybe you can talk a bit as to why Vision 2020 is that guide that we believe can help people.
I mean, ultimately, you know, you can go on YouTube, you can look at videos, you can read blog posts, you can read books, you can find all the information you need to do what you need to do. But there's a lot of information out there. We've done big courses in the past with like hundreds of people on an online course for a few weeks, and it's been great. And we're giving people loads of content. But the thing we found really hard is to integrate that into their work and to do it over an extended period of time. And so when we thought about designing this course, we wanted to create something that built habits ultimately. And building habits allows people to build more sustainable work practices and build their knowledge, build connection with others, and also hopefully build their business, because those habits are things that you will then bring to the rest of your business life afterwards, beyond the 5 months. And so for us, the key thing that we've seen people struggle with is having support around them. Like I said, not having people around them who truly get what it takes to step into the unknown, having a really tight-knit group of people around them. And the other thing is accountability, to give them things to do each week and for them to be checked on, not go off and do it and we won't have any visibility on you. So we deliberately brought together 3 groups of 6 or 7 people for this program, so that each of us, me, you, Carlos, and me, you, and Lana, have a small group to look after, and we only have to look after 6, 7 people for 20 weeks, and it's a joy because we can then really get deep into their businesses, really understand where they're at, and give them clear direction on what to do each time. And that is gold dust, because we need that. You've got a million things you could do every day, and who do you listen to? Like I said, if you're at the start, you've got so many voices. Just having that focus, those blinkers on, to be able to say, all I have to focus on this week is this thing, and having a space to explore that with other people is where it's at. So for me, that's the crux of this, really, is just having that clear focus and clarity and accountability to move forward.
Yeah. And that's, when you talked about habits there, one of the things we hope to communicate over the time of the program and on this journey of practice, and call it practice and integration, is letting go some of the old habits that might not be helpful. Maybe the worry around the money, or obsessing over whether something's perfect, or having doubts as to whether to share an idea or a question, and cultivating these new habits of being a bit more vulnerable, having people around you that you are willing to go to immediately if there's a question or a problem that you have, having not necessarily well-formed ideas, but being able to share them as a process for getting clarity. And all of these habits that we're trying to get people to create, and whether it's their perception or beliefs around money, which we'll be tackling tomorrow, or whether it's about working from the inside out, defining success not based on a picture of the future, but maybe also based on needs that you have, core emotional needs, which we talked about yesterday. Using those as tools to then get to this place, this point B, where there is more clarity and more confidence to work on the ideas and to play with the ideas more than anything else that you may have, that will give you more happiness and joy in the work that you do. So point A being a stage where the work you're doing is draining, and point B where the journey you're on and the work that you're doing is actually energizing and exciting. And how you do that? Well, this is this journey of how do we get people from this state of confusion as to, I don't know what to build, I don't know if this is the right thing, I don't know if I'm the right person, to a bit more clarity about who they are, what lights them up, who they want to help, and why they want to help them, and what is it that they could potentially help them with. Because without that, like Lauren said, there's going to be a lot of bets or guesswork that it may land that it makes a lot of money for you, it's a good business, but it also may be something that's going to make you miserable. So we want to help people avoid that, get so obsessed with these kind of very tangible metrics of success that seem to be baked into the traditional business, and thinking about things a bit more holistically with people who appreciate that way of doing things. So that's the journey of change that we like to talk about, that we're taking people through on Vision 2020. I hope it helps you reframe how you think about the work that you're doing, not getting too focused on the technicalities and the products and the services and the details of it, but reconnecting again to how does it make someone's life differently better. Any final words, Lawrence, for those still with us?
Well, in the interest of, like you said, us trying to give people one thing to think about, I guess a parting message for this part of the week would be to not obsess about a solution, to really just hold any solution you have lightly and be open to change. Again, linked to the title, I think it's particularly the current market, things change so quickly, and we've seen so many people, us included, waste a lot of time and money on the wrong thing. And it's not that you're wrong, it's just that for whatever reason it just hasn't landed right. So yeah, just being stubborn on the vision, as I think Jeff Bezos said once, stubborn on vision but flexible on the details.
Yes, and fluid on your identity. You can be all sorts of ways of being in this whole work, and I think the more that you can let go of fear of failure, fear of criticism, getting things wrong, the more fun it's going to be. So Looking
Exactly.
forward to seeing you all tomorrow, where we'll be talking about money and
Happy money.
happy money. And if you're curious and intrigued by that, then same time, same place. Until then, have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your
Take
lovely
care. Bye bye.